that we went through for our answer for question 6. Of course, this is for our distance and formula distance formula and the equation of a circle practice. And we went through 6 in a lot of detail. And so hopefully some of the skills we learned in 6 are going to help us in 7 so that we don't have to go through 7 in quite the same amount of detail. All right, let's get a new piece of paper here. So for question 7, all right, let's read through it. It says a circle centered at 4, -2. 4, -2 has a radius of 3. And then we have this point, again, kind of similar to this one, which has a variable for one of the coordinates. And we have to find that variable. So, okay, it looks pretty similar. The only difference being that we just start by writing out the equation of our circle before we can start. In this first question, we were given the equation of the circle. That seems pretty trivial, though. I think we can do that. Okay, so we know that our circle has a center of 4, -2. So our x0 and y0 are at 4, -2. And we have a radius of 3, so r is 3. Okay, simple enough. So that means I can rewrite my formula. X take away 4 squared plus y take away -2, which is y plus 2 squared. And it's equal to 3 squared, which is 9. All right. And so we know the point P, -1, is on this circle somewhere, which means that's an x and a y value that, as a pair, should represent a solution. Give me truth on the left should equal 9. Equal 9. If it doesn't give us a true statement like that, then, well, we're in trouble. All right, so I'm going to test that by putting in P for the value of x. Take away 4 squared plus -1 for y. And then I'm going to crunch some numbers here. So I've got P take away 4 squared plus -1 plus 2. Okay, that's +1. Squared is 1 is equal to 9. Okay, so I could expand that, but I think it's going to get uglier than I want. That would actually be kind of interesting if we expanded it. So maybe I'll make a little trail across and say maybe expand. Maybe we'll come back to that path because there are multiple ways to get to our answer here. Now, that wouldn't be my first intuition. My first intuition would be to try to just slowly isolate P. So I'm going to try just taking away 1 from both sides. And we're going to go this route. So take away 1, so that would leave me with P take away 4 squared on the left, and so equal to 8 on the right. Okay, now I'm going to undo a square, so I'm going to, I should really look up which one is called the principal square root, because I hate forgetting this. We'll undo squaring by square rooting, but we have to remember there's a negative value here as well. We get P minus 4 is equal to plus or minus, oh, we've seen the square root of 8 before. We saw that in the last question. So we know the square root of 8 is just 2 root 2. And so P really has a value of plus or minus 2 root 2. And then we're going to add 4 to both sides. Plus 4. Okay, that looks a little ugly, so I like to actually write it as two statements. I like to say P is 2 root 2 plus 4, or P equals -2 root 2 plus 4. All right. So, well, does that make any sense? Well, let's see here. Let's get a sketch of this thing. So, let's use a bit of graph paper, actually. So I'm going to graph this, see if I can make some sense out of it. All right. So, for question 7, I'm going to graph this function first, 7. So we've got a center at 4, -2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And a radius of 3. So we've got a radius of 3 here, 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 and here. Now I'm going to do my best to draw a nice circle. And I think with this example, it might matter that I draw a nice circle, because we're going to see if a point makes sense to be on it. So we kind of want a relatively decent circle. So, okay, great. So then what do we know? We know that in theory, we should have 2 points that are on this graph. So p -1 and p could have 2 values. So I'm going to start by abbreviating p. So 2 root 2 plus 4 is a number. 2 root 2 plus 4. It's actually 6.8. Okay. So 6.83 ... and this is AKA. So negative, this is not going to be negative 6.83. It's going to be negative 2 root 2. And then that number plus 4. So it's actually going to be approximately 1.17. I'm going to put a little approximately sign in front of here. So, pardon me. So that means we should have the point around 6.83, -1, is on our function, which I'm not going to write the equation of. And I can also say, okay, therefore approximately 1.17 for x and -1 for y is on our circle. So is that true? Well, let's just go to point 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and like 0.8 and a bit of the way down. Okay, and then down -1. Hey, it looks like that point is on our circle. Approximately 6.83 and -1. What do you know? I can't draw the exact value because well, nobody can. So we're going to leave it there. We're going to say we did pretty well for ourselves. Okay, great. How about approximately 1.17? So 1 for x, and then that's like a fifth of the way roughly, and take away a bit. Down to -1. Hey, that actually is also on our graph. The point approximately 1.17, and -1 is also on our circle. Interesting. Okay, cool. So that's a way of confirming. We can also plot our circle in Desmos and use our cursor to maybe get a more exact number of decimal places to confirm that even more precisely. But a little sketch like this is helpful to try to ask, does this make sense? Why do we have 2 answers? We have 2 answers because there's 2 values along the circle that hit -1 for y, and they're here and here. And we solve for both of them. All right, so let's move on to our last question of the practice. Question 8. A circle is centered at 2, 5, and one of the points on the circle is 4, 8. And we're going to see if we can find the radius of the circle and determine the equation of the circle. All right, so that's a good old problem. One of the reasons I like it is because I don't really know how to solve it. Well, that's kind of a lie. I do know how to solve it, but I think I'm going to explore it as if I didn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by drawing a picture. So I would start with some sort of grape strategy. We can recognize we're given a circle is centered at 2/5. And there's a point on the circle, which is 4, 8. That's what's given. And we're required to find the radius of the circle, determine the radius. And we're also required to give the equation of the circle. All right. Now, we'll move on to the A letter. So these are given. These are required. And then I'm going to move on to, I suppose, G's. They look like 6s. Now I'm going to move on to A, which is my kind of art. I'm going to see if I can draw this at all. All right, so I'm going to try to draw a circle with a point at 2, 5. Pardon me, a center at 2, 5. And a point at 4, 8. So I'm going to see if I can get an idea about what this thing looks like. So it sounds like those guys are in the first quadrant, so I'm going to leave some space in the first quadrant for maximum space. All right, so centered at the point 2, 5. So I'm going to draw a point at 1, 2 in x, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in y. And that's my center of my circle. So I'm going to label that C. And I'm going to label that C in the question so that it makes sense later if I forget what C was supposed to be. All right, and the point 4, 8 is on the circle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the point 4, 8 is on the circle. Okay, so all of a sudden I can get a picture of this circle. I know it's going to probably look something like this. And I can almost draw the rest of it. However, this is just a sketch, right? I don't actually know that it's going to hit at these points. I can't look at the sketch and read the radius right off of it. I'm not quite sure. This is like a little sketch. It helps me orient myself. Okay. So that helps me get a little bit of information. And this is, I think I can label this without getting too messy. It's 0.25. All right. So that's all right. So let's look back at the question now. So we have a picture. And the question says, can we determine the radius of the circle? Can we determine the distance from here to here, in other words? Maybe we can do that. Now it looks like, by the extension of our circle, that our radius is somewhat around 4, but it might not be exactly 4. It might be a little above or a little below, so we're going to try and find the exact value. Now, but I think we can do that using, I know a way to find a distance between 2 points in space. That's our distance formula. So our distance formula says that if we want to find the distance between 2 points, x1 and y1, and x2 and y2, we can use this formula, which says take away x1 from x2, take away x1 from x2, and add the difference of y2, take away y1 squared. And we're going to square root that whole thing, which is really the same thing as using the Pythagorean theorem. This is a triangle with a leg of 2 and a leg of 3. We need the hypotenuse. All right. So let's just find out then. Okay, so our distance is square root of 4, take away 2 squared, plus my y2 is 8, take away my y1 is 5 squared. So my distance is the square root of 2 squared plus 3 squared. Oh, what do you know? Kind of like the Pythagorean theorem. Distance of 2, distance of 3. We're going to square them, add them, and then find the square root to find the hypotenuse. And that's distance, d. Okay. And so we're going to find our distance is the square root of 4 plus 9, which is 4 plus 9. That's the square root of 13. Now, it's very important you don't distribute the square root and say this is the same thing as 2 plus 3. It's not. The square root does not have a distributive principle. We can't distribute it to individuals. So we get our distance is the square root of 13, which sounds like it's actually a little smaller than 4. So maybe I overestimated a bit when I was drawing this upward. But it's definitely bigger than 3, because 3 is the square root of 9, which would be down here. The square root of 16 would be 4, and this guy's kind of in between those two. Okay. So that's our radius. So our radius is square root of 13. Now, okay, so that's A. And can we now determine the equation of the circle? Well, if we know the center and we know the radius, yeah, we can write the equation of the whole circle. All right, so the equation of a circle goes like this. X take away our x coordinate of our center point. Y take away our y coordinate of our center point is equal to the square of the radius. All right, so my center point, x is 2, so I'm going to x take away 2 squared plus I've got y take away 5 squared, and that's going to be equal to root 13 squared. I could simplify that, so I'll go one step further, and I'll say x take away 2 squared plus y take away 5 squared is equal to the root 13 squared, which is 13. And that is our final answer.